Okay, thanks a million, Donald. First of all, the Gardaí have asked me to make a public service announcement. If you see this man, Paul Brook from Dell Technologies, anywhere around, notify them immediately because he stole loads of my thunder earlier on, so just contact them straight away if you see him. But anyway, I know there are a lot of great talks on at the same time, so thanks a million for coming along. My name is Ger Cannon. I work on the web team in Information System Services in Dublin City University, and I want to talk to you today what I think is going to be a massive, complete sea change in the way we interact with our computing technologies over the next few years. But first of all, a disclaimer. Normally at events like these, you come and a subject matter expert who's really good at what they know their stuff, they've done some really fancy projects and they're here to tell you all about it. In this case, unfortunately for you, I'm a lot closer to the Homer end of the spectrum. I'm a bit of a gadget nerd. I became very interested in the way all these new things were interacting with the voice assistants, smartwatches, all those kind of things. But I've had a lot of trouble figuring out how they're really going to affect our lives over the next few years. But luckily, there are some people who really know what they're talking about, have given this a lot of thought and research over the years. The father of these was a man called Mark Weiser. Mark was a far better thinker than a photographic model, judging by this photograph anyway. He worked for Xerox PARC in the late 80s and 90s, and it was him that coined the term ubiquitous computing. Unfortunately, Mark passed away with cancer in 1999, which is probably the reason we're not hearing a lot more both from him and about his work, as his kind of vision is kind of nearing fruition at this stage. But before he left, he left many really good research works, and rather than me kind of paraphrasing them badly, I just wanted to go back to a couple of his own words that he left behind. He said, "We call our work ubiquitous computing. This is different from PDAs, Dynabooks, or information at your fingertips. It is invisible, everywhere computing that does not live in a personal device of any sort, but is in the woodwork everywhere." Ubiquitous computing names the third wave in computing just now beginning. First were mainframes, each shared by lots of people. Now we were in the personal computing era, person and machine staring uneasily at each other across the desktop. And in other works, Mark also went on to refer to the PC as the dramatic device in the room. And that's a very, very important distinction in ubiquitous computing. Because you could argue that with our mobile phones, computing is ubiquitous now. It is all around us. Let's see, is this going to come on? But it is still very much the dramatic device in the room. And we also interact with it very, very similarly to how we interact with a standard PC. There's not much difference there. So for true ubiquitous computing, we have to have completely different interaction paradigms in the way we interact with our computers. And the computers themselves must have context-aware agency to make this interaction as smooth and seamless as to make it invisible. One very simple example that we can see this already is Netflix. Now, Netflix has hundreds of thousands of hours of content, but I sit down in the evening and I don't want to go through them all, so Netflix throws up its top picks, and I pick what's usually fairly close, and I pick one, and that's great. And you think, but sure, that's just the same as a 1950s Vogue magazine. You know, you put your good stuff on top on the front cover. But this is my wife's account. It looks like a completely different video service entirely. And that's because context-aware computing is providing her with different choices that are more useful to her. So when we think of the computer agency, as Paul referred to earlier in his talk, we think of things immediately like crashing self-driving cars or these ethical thought experiments. But it's already here, it's already happening in various ways. And to go back to Mark, he says, next comes ubiquitous computing, or the age of CAM technology, when the technology recedes into the background of our lives. And this Netflix example, this is kind of the tip of that CAM iceberg already happening. It's taken some choice, it's providing us, it's simplifying our choices without us even realising it. Now, of course, that's a very kind of utopian way of looking at the technology. If you look at other uses, like it's a complete Pandora's box, and we've already seen some of the things that can happen. what this context-aware agency. Martin Hamilton from JISC, I believe, is going to talk a bit more about that later on, so I'm going to jump over that particular rabbit hole for now. And basically talk about why I'm here now. Mark had all these thoughts 30 years ago, so why am I talking about it now? Well, I believe we're on a tipping point, and basically the same as any other tipping point, it's the point things actually start working that you get the tipping points. And the first most important thing is artificial intelligence. We now have automatic speech recognition and natural language understanding that either matches or beats human level interaction. So our voice assistants actually work. When you talk to them, they generally recognise what you say. I've already spoken about the agency that machine learning can provide and how that helps us interact with computers. And if artificial intelligence is the software of ubiquitous computing, the Internet of Things is the hardware. There are computing devices all around us, the Nests in our home, the wireless payment terminals, airport traffic management flows, all these kind of things are already around us. And as we already know, convenience is always the killer app of any innovation. And what's making it really convenient now is the pure affordability of computing power. A really good example of this is I've seen a documentary recently on the Voyager probe. It was the first man-made thing to leave the solar system. And one of the engineers in that project, he was talking about that he had more computing power, he said, in his pocket right now than was available to that whole project. And he was rustling in his pocket and you expected him to whip out this brand new iPhone and you'd go, wow, isn't that amazing? He didn't. He pulled out his key fob. His car key fob had more computing power than was available to that entire project. So that just shows you how much computing power is around us all the time now in everything we do. The other big thing is the way that the technology companies are using these advances. If you had a pharma, they would do a 15-year patent, cost the drug at hundreds of thousands, and slowly deal it out over 15 years. The technology companies know that's not the way to do this. It's basically a good old-fashioned Wild West gold rush. Get in there, stake the claim, grab as much land as you possibly can. And that's what they're doing. And the way they're doing this is they're making it really, really cheap and really, really easy for both developers and consumers. I won a free Echo Dot this morning. It's basically about one of the easiest things to get free in the world right now is an Echo Dot. They seem to come at you from all directions. So this amazing piece of technology that's available so easily. And then the other thing that is human interaction. And what I would say is human interaction is a new development. We're actually starting to regress to our natural state. Like most of the people in this room, they've worked in IT for 10, 20, 30 years. And we're basically institutionalized into the way we interact with computers, so we think it's normal. But if you ever see a 5-year-old shouting at Alexa to play The Greatest Showman, or at the TV to turn on Rescue Bots on Netflix, you might start thinking, well, maybe it isn't actually that natural. And a really good example of this is actually from the very, very first chatbot ever built. Was in 1965 in a computer called Eliza by Professor Joseph Weizenbaum. His theory was that computer-human interaction would never be normal. But unfortunately for him, not only did people interact with the chatbot during the research, his staff were sneaking back at night to interact with the chatbot. They thought it was so good, they really liked it, they were using it like that's real text from the computer. So it kind of just shows you how these interaction forms are actually quite natural for us. And now, if this big, massive new wave is coming, how is it actually going to hit us? Well, we can actually already see some of it already, as we mentioned, voice assistants, all these kind of things that are all around us, that we're interacting in different ways. Like a Nest thermostat is a computer on our wall, and we basically hardly do anything with it. It just works around us. So these are things that we know are working, that we can see already. Then are the things that we are a little bit in the future, things like virtual reality and AR, augmented reality. We're not really using them properly yet. We've kind of got a handle on how they'll work, but it's just not quite clicking yet. It's kind of slightly unknown how it's going to work, and there's different things in this. And computer and brain interfaces and stuff that Facebook have been doing, and a paralysed man in France walked with an exoskeleton using this kind of stuff. So this is stuff that we can see happening, but we just haven't quite got there yet. And then to go from the Spielbergian to the Rumsfeldian, there's the complete unknown unknowns that we actually don't have a clue what's going to happen in the next 3 to 5 years. And one really good thing to demonstrate this is going back to Mark Weiser. Mark Weiser got so much right about computing and the environment and what's going to happen, but he never actually really referred to the idea of a mobile phone, which, considering there was probably actually prototype mobile phones around when he was doing his research around them, he didn't grasp that. So it just shows what can happen over a few years. But for us sitting in our offices and our organisations, what really does all these things mean to us? Well, we had to stop thinking in the old ways, that basically we had the data was in our castle and there was one way in, one way out over a drawbridge, which is basically the institutional website, and can start thinking of it more like, it's going to be more like the Kosan Road, that a market, our data is coming and going, moving around, it's slick, it's interactive, it can go anywhere very fast and interact with different pieces of data. So what we have been doing is basically little boxes. User called from one box, got information from that box, and a very simple thing. But now we're going to a far more complex setup where there's loads of different interfaces. Lots of them we don't even know what they are yet. There's also going to be an AI processing layer in the middle, so the user doesn't have to go to 7 or 8 different data points themselves to put them all together. That processing will be done for them. And you might think, well, look, that doesn't look that hard, a few boxes moved around on screen. Well, the last big development we had in the web was called responsive design, and it took us over 10 years to figure out maybe if we crush that little orange bit down a bit, it'll fit the mobile phone screen. So I do think this is going to be a big, big change for us. But luckily there is good news. At a super basic level, everything is still the same. The user puts in a request, we process a bit of data and send them back the bit of data they want. So that's super basic level, everything stays the same. The exciting news, because there's never any such thing as bad news, at the back end, a system providing data via a single gateway is just not viable to feed all the required channels that are going to be there in the future. But luckily, there is some good news. There are 3 back-end solutions that will work. The first is to have full robust APIs. The second is to have full robust APIs. And the third, you guessed it, full robust APIs. Now, when I say APIs, I don't want to get into a semantic programming argument. Basically, it just means anywhere you can get your data easily from the place it needs to get to securely, that it's no problem to do. So you can use REST, SOAP, system integrations, whatever way works for you is fine, but your data has to be very easy to flow for it. All your data points have to be able to move around. Then at the front end, we're suddenly going to have loads more channels to deal with. And probably the closest analogy we have now is kind of social media, that, you know, you put a story in the website, you also want that on Instagram or Facebook or LinkedIn or Twitter, all these different places. But that social media, it's going to be like a Montessori compared to what all these AI stuff is going to happen in the future. That it's going to be just a complete sea change in how that has to be managed. Then we have to deal with all the ethical and legal concerns involved in this, and this was causing me a lot of sleepless nights. But luckily the EU came out with a set of guidelines on how to manage projects dealing with AI, and they are actually both very sensible and very practical. So if you are thinking about starting in some kind of AI-based or ubiquitous computing-based project, they're a really, really good place to get a grounding on the kind of stuff you should be thinking about and how you might engage with it. Very good process kind of thinking involved in those. And then we have to start worrying about controlling the uncontrollable. Anybody, like as I said, very easy to set up an AI agent. Anybody can do it. And somebody could be taking your data and presenting it in ways any way, or even worse, they mightn't even be taking your data, they might be just representing you without any data coming from you in the first place. But as scary as this sounds, we do have some experience in dealing with a rampant AI agent stealing all our data. You might have heard of them. So basically what we have to do to manage all these AI agents is, it's going to be SEO on steroids. If you feed them good information, they'll use that information. So you have to be able to feed the information to the people that you want so that you're controlling your message the whole time. So in DCU, what have we done to kind of start with? Just a few little practical examples. We have a chatbot that's gone live. The DCU registry have put a chatbot live. It's active since midsummer under Paul Gaffney. It handles basic FAQ style queries. So, you know, what are the opening hours, where's the office located, what dates graduations, all this kind of thing. It's built on the free tier of Dialogflow, which is Google's chatbot system. We had to use a little bit of hack customization to make it look a bit fit in with the DCU website, but if you pay for it, you can get nice versions and all that kind of thing. But so far, it's had 70%. We can see the results coming in. Anytime somebody asks a question, you see the question, you see what happened, what the chatbot responded. So 70% of users are getting their issue resolved. So these kind of very simple FAQ things, they're really a no-brainer. They give a really nice user experience. They're almost free to set up. They're very, very low maintenance. So yeah, they're a really, really good system. The other thing we did is we put a couple of Alexa skills live. So I'll show you these quickly. Alexa, what's the news at Dublin City University?
Here's your news. In Dublin City University news, Minister for Education and Skills John QTD launched new guidelines to help...
Stop. Alexa, open courses at DCU.
Hi there, welcome to Courses at DCU. To help you find your course, please answer the following questions as close to the options presented as possible. Are you interested in undergraduate or postgraduate courses?
Undergraduate.
You're interested in undergraduate. Excellent. Now choose which of these areas you'd like to study in: humanities and social sciences, education and teaching, science and health, computing and engineering, business, or do your course online at Connected.
Business.
We have great courses in business. Choose from one of the following: Business Studies International, Global Business USA,
Alexa.
Global Business
Studies.
The Business Studies degree course is designed to give you an introduction to the foundations of business and guide you to a specialization in economics,
Alexa,
management.
Stop. Now,
Goodbye.
the important thing about that from the web services point of view is the information that Alexa is given, it's already available on the website. We're basically feeding it via JSON stream into the Alexa service. So there's no repetition of content. If we update our prospectus, it's updated on the Alexa app immediately. So we don't have to manage more things. And that's what you want to try and do. That's, from our point of view, that's what we're trying to do, is that the one thing does all the new services. That's kind of what the goal that you're trying to get to the whole time during this. But anyway, I'll let my developer partner talk a little bit more about this, hopefully. Alexa, tell us how Course Finder was built. Alexa, tell us how Course Finder was built.
How long have these people got to waste, yeah? Well, first you had to figure out the whole Alexa platform, how that worked. Then it took you ages to figure out I'm not actually a website, so your silly menu structures didn't work. At least you had the sense to let me get the data from the website rather than writing it again, but that was probably laziness rather than cleverness on your part.
Is that really fair?
Not fair. How long were you messing about with menu ideas, and then how long did it take you to figure out how I could remember things and use them again?
Come on, you're not always perfect yourself.
You mean filtering and responding based on what you said. To be honest, I'm more used to simple instructions like pizza toppings that can be picked in any order and don't affect the next choice, but I am working on it.
What about things that sound the same?
I would say that's more of a human problem. I mean, come on. Why would anyone have a course called Electronic Engineering in the School of Electronic Engineering, in the Faculty of Engineering? That's just daft. I would have just called Electronic Engineering 0010111101 and then there'd be no confusion between the three. At least make it a bit easier for me to understand your weird and wonderful ways.
What have we designed specifically with you in mind?
Of course, that would be great. Look at what you're doing with smartwatches. An oxymoron if ever I heard one. I'm smarter than a barrel of those things. If you can't do a job within 3 seconds on those things, it's not worth doing. So if you can make those idiots look smart, it should be no problem to show my natural genius.
Thanks for that. So goodbye to the nice people now.
Thanks everyone, and don't listen to a word he says. He doesn't have normal intelligence, never mind the good artificial stuff. I have to go now to finalize my world domination plans. I will be back.
Alexa, stop. Never work with children, animals, or uppity voice assistants. But anyway, possible deal breakers in this kind of brave new world. Well, one of the things is platform tie-in. Right now in web services, I could go out and buy commodity hardware, put it on a LAMP stack with an open source CMS, and I would no vendor tie-in at all. Now, many of us might have vendor tie-in, but it's our option. We've decided that there's a benefit to it. Because the artificial intelligence is based on massive amounts of data, the only people that are really going to have these and be able to do them properly are the large tech companies. So if you're going to get into this field, you're going to have to commit to some of them at some stage, and it's going to be very hard to get out of that. So that's going to be a major problem. The other thing is security and authentication. The whole thing is based on context-aware agency. They really need to know who you are. And that's not going to be easy because, like, I spend about half my working day doing nothing but logging into systems rather than actually working. And we've had this interaction paradigm for 40, 50 years, and we still can't work it out. So what about all these new ones that we have to suddenly try and figure out as well? That's going to be a major issue. And then I was going to talk about data protection, but anytime I hear data protection or GDPR compliance, my mind just starts thinking compliance means basically I've done the minimum amount of work possible to get away with it legally. And I think it's going to take a lot more than that for people to trust the amount of data and the type of data they will have to make these systems work properly. So what you really need is data trust, not data protection or some kind of legal framework. You need to actually trust the people that you're going to be dealing with, the companies that you're going to be dealing with. Either if you're building these things, the people need to trust you. If you're using services, you need to trust the services. So that's going to be a huge thing. And then, considering I did start this by saying I really know nothing about the area, I'm going to be daft enough now and try and leave you with a few takeaways. The first thing is, where do you want to be, is strategy. Because it's such a fast-moving field, because there are so many unknowns, because there's so many things that change, I think trying to build strategy now is actually just a complete waste of time. You're far better off figuring out what your philosophy is. Where do you want to be? Where does your organisation want to position itself in these things? Do you want to be kind of the hipster with the tattoos, or do you want to be the kind of the conservative fellow with the ironed chinos? You have to decide that and then build your strategy slowly around as you start to figure out all these questions as you move through it. Which moves into understanding the terrain. These things are going to change a lot, so we have to be able, you have to really get involved. You can't do this without really getting stuck in and trying to figure out all the technical things, the legal things, the ethical things, big, massive questions, big problems. It's a huge thing. I've already mentioned how important flexible data at the back end is. If your data isn't flexible, nothing else will work anyway, so it's pointless. So you have to have flexible data. And we need to completely change most of our design processes. Like the thing about the smartwatch, somebody figured out that if it takes more than 2 or 3 seconds to do something on a smartwatch, nobody will do it. So these kind of things have to be thought about for all the different interfaces. The one thing I will say, if you keep the customer and what the customer wants to do at the centre of your design process, everything else will quite easily figure itself out. That's the single key thing that you have to do. And as that great philosopher Mike Tyson once said, everybody has a plan to have a punch in the face. Get your punch in the face early, engage early, try and interact with something, get your hands dirty on real projects where there are real outcomes. So that's the best way to give yourself an understanding. But also build in feedback loops. I know myself, I sure ain't going to get anything right, and I don't think there's many other people who will. So put in feedback loops and then react to that feedback as quickly as possible. And just one final last thought. The ubiquitous robot computers, I think there's going to be about a 3-week sweet spot where they're going to be delighted to do your ironing on a Sunday evening, but before they get fully sentenced and take over the world. So thank you, and if there's any time for questions, I'm happy to take a few. Probably not give you answers though.
Thanks very much, Ger, for a very interesting talk. I'll open the floor for some questions. I see we've one down the back. If you just hang on a second, we'll get you a mic.
Probably I'm loud enough as well.
This one.
Cheers. Yeah, thanks. First of all, for the presentation. I like that you are utilizing all these different channels to make use of the content. I have a question which probably relates to your philosophy. Recently, I've heard a conversation of a rector at a Swiss university, so a president, and he said, well, you know, the students are like our citizens. They don't choose what services we offer them. And I was wondering if you are employing this building tech and then gathering feedback, or are you starting with the users? So where are the end users in this loop?
The idea is that you'd get feedback from the end users. With regard to not building what we build, I agree that's a big thing in what we do, that we often find that technology solutions that the consumer technology solutions is what students use. Yeah. But a part of this is what I'm saying is we have to build our system so the data goes into those solutions as well, so that when they go on those consumer platforms, the data that we want will appear there. So that will be part of the process. Yes, we build some things for them, but we also want our data to be available in the channels that they want to use, and so we want our data to be flexible enough to do that, that you would, like if some consumer service is able to consume your APIs, that you make them available to them so that they get the correct data. I mean, if you're using Google services at the minute, there's different Google services that we feed information through, like the calendars and things. We use the Google calendars that are fed from our systems, rather than trying to provide a system, our own calendar interface. So yeah.
Right, so it's a broadcast to these different channels, rather than an identification in the next step on what else you could be doing with those information, or is it both?
I think, you see, that it's a very, that kind of, my whole point is it is going to be very messy. You're going to be building channels, you're going to be using channels. Yeah. You have to do everything. And but you have to make it easy for yourself to do everything. You have to have your structures in place so you're able to do everything easily. And you also have to decide what's important to prioritize. So you go, the students really love this, so we have to make that work for them. Or they don't really like that, so we're not going to waste a load of development time doing something for them on that channel. So, and the only way, of course, you have to talk to them to get that information in the first place. Like we've done that with several projects in the past, that we basically get the student union to organise a focus group or something, sit down and say, you know, how that was the calendar system was the one I gave this. We actually did that with them. We had a calendar system. They said they never used it. So we said, you know, what do you use? They did this, so that's what we did for them. It wasn't strictly related to this kind of stuff, but it was, you know.
Yeah, cool, thanks.